my biggest take home, I think, is for people who are coming to the conference to really get to relax and enjoy the city. It's a wonderful city to wander around.
You're listening to the Architect My Life podcast, a show dedicated to empowering women architects and designers to achieve business growth, financial freedom, and health and wellness. I'm Shlachter, your host and CEO of MGS Global Group. Our company provides Revit, ArchiCAD, and CAD drafting services to busy architects and design firm owners. MGS Global started as a part-time gig when I was a new mom, but it has now grown into a thriving business that provides drafting support to creatives, helping everyone maintain a healthy work-life balance. This podcast is proudly presented by MGS Global Group. Now let's dive into this episode. Hi everyone, our guest for this episode is Shannon Battisson. Shannon is an architect from Canberra, Australia. She believes in making architecture accessible to everyone and is dedicated to raising awareness about the importance of the architecture in our community. She's also passionate about environmental design. With over 15 years of experience, she has worked on various projects in Canberra, Hong Kong, and the US. She has held positions such as the president of the Australian Institute of Architects, Australian Capital Territory Chapter, and chair of the Chapter Sustainability Committee. She has received prestigious awards including the ACT President's Medal and the Australian Institute of Architects ACT Chapter Emerging Architect Prize. Currently, she serves as the immediate past national president and is the conference committee chair for this year's Australian Architecture Conference in Canberra, Australia. I'm so thrilled to talk to her today. Welcome to the show, Shannon. I'm so thrilled that you agreed to be in our podcast. To be honest, I didn't know you were the conference head because I was looking at your name on the video, but you didn't have a name on the video. Like I couldn't see your name. So when Mary told me we're talking to Shannon, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And you're the perfect person to talk about the conference because you're the organizer or the chair. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's very exciting to think that we've got people coming from all over for the conference. It's a really wonderful thing and it's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to welcoming people to my town.
So it's going to be my first time in Australia. And I must admit, I was feeling a little bit nervous because I've never been there before. I travel 4 months a year. I go all over the country, Europe, Asia, but Australia is my first time. But let me tell you, when I started, connecting through LinkedIn, a lot of the people from Canberra were so nice. So many people responded to me. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And some people gave me their phone numbers just to give me help as to where I'm going to stay. Because a lot of people go to Sydney or Melbourne. I mean, I'm so excited. I almost forgot about my 28-hour flight.
Yeah, the flight's the rough bit. I'm not going to lie. It's funny because Australians, it takes us so long to get anywhere. So we don't, the long flight is just part of doing anything. But I know that when people come to Australia for the first time, often the distance, our isolation is a big part of it. But once you're here, Australia, I think, is a very easy country to travel in. It's very safe and people are very friendly and helpful. They want visitors to have a good time. So I think it's a very easy place to get around.
Yes. So before we get started or dive into our conference, I would like to learn more about you and your why architecture, because also my podcast is called the Architect My Life podcast. It started out as a all women podcast. It still is. We interview women thought leaders, business owners, people who are making waves as a woman in architecture. And and when I found you, I was so excited. So I just have a question about, your history as, like why you studied architecture. Is there a person, a childhood experience or place that influenced you to become an architect when you were young
Look, when I was really little, believe it or not, I found books that were mine when I was a child and I was drawing houses and plans and things like that, which is funny to think that it was part of my play process even as a young child. As I got older, it wasn't really on my radar and I wanted to study medicine. And I took a couple of years off after finishing school and I was doing a lot of travel. And after one of my trips, my mother was looking at my photos. I'm a big photographer. I really love photography, and my mother said I'd been to Canada to visit my sister who was studying at university in Montreal. And my mum said, I love your photos, Shannon, and the buildings are really beautiful, but I'd love a photo of you or your sister maybe in front of a building, and maybe you should study architecture because clearly you have this real love of buildings. And from the moment she said it, it clicked, and I knew that that's actually what I wanted to study. And medicine kind of went out the door. And from that point forward, I was only interested in studying architecture. Interestingly, I've tried to not leave the profession, but I've had breaks from the profession several times. I think it's a really demanding profession. It can be very stressful. It can be very stressful being in business. But it's always drawn me back. I can't actually... I don't think I can live without it. It's a big part of who I am, which I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I really love architecture. I love public spaces and the built environment and how much they can affect the way we live. And I love our homes. I'm very grateful to get to design housing. I know some people think that there's, that housing is only for architects just starting out and that everybody should want to do big public architecture. But actually, I actively choose not to do bigger buildings because I believe very strongly that our houses are sacred spaces. They're very, very important spaces. They are where we bring our babies home from the hospital. They're where we go to when we grieve. They're where we retreat when we're sick. In the last few years, our homes have had to protect us from so much. Here in Canberra, we had a really horrific run into the pandemic, and we went through 3 months of really toxic smoke where we had bushfires burning all around us, and the smoke was so bad. My 7-year-old daughter was getting 7 or 8 nosebleeds a day because the smoke was so bad. And that's in a city where, if I look outside now, we actually have some of the cleanest air in the world. So to have the worst air in the world for 3 straight months was really something. And our homes, that's where we went to try and save ourselves from that. We had to shelter in our homes when the bushfires went through. We then had a crazy hailstorm where something like 50,000 cars got written off in one 15-minute storm. We all sheltered in our homes. And then, of course, we went into the pandemic. So if we think about our homes, I think they're incredibly important spaces, and they make a huge difference to how healthy we are, how happy we are, how we live, and how we come together as families. And so I really absolutely love the work that I do and getting to share that with people.
So I'm glad you stayed in the profession.
Yeah, me too.
So what is, I know you have your own firm, right? The Mill?
Yes, I do.
So do you do
Yep.
primarily residential? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I run a practice with one of my colleagues, Sarah Welsh. So she is an interior designer. I'm an architect, and we run a practice called the Mill Architecture and Design. We do a really big range of projects. I specialise in climate responsive housing, and we do a real mix of both renovating older Canberra homes that don't perform very well in our climate. The climate in Canberra is really quite harsh. We have very, very cold winters and very hot summers. But we also have a climate that's really easy to design passively for. So our winters are very cold, but we get a lot of sunshine. Our summers are very hot, but we get very cool nights. So they're really easy to design for, and I love designing houses that operate really naturally within that environment. Sarah, my business partner, loves designing really bespoke commercial spaces. So we do a lot of boutique office spaces, real estate agents, government work, shops and restaurants and things like that. So we actually do a really big range of projects across the practice. We're a small practice. Until very recently, we're an entirely female-run and owned practice. There's 6 of us, and I think our biggest aim in running the business is actually to just create a space that we all love coming into each day, and create a space that our clients feel really relaxed and comfortable and can enjoy the process of doing a project with us.
Congratulations on the growth of your company. And you seem very diversified, which is really important.
Yeah, it is.
So could you tell us a little bit about your role in the Australian Institute of Architects? Do you call it AIA also, or do I have to say Australian Institute of Architects?
We call it the Institute, I think, because the American Institute of Architects has really kind of cornered the AIA.
Okay, so I'll say the Institute.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
and
right.
also how you got into the leadership positions,
Of
or
course.
how you got from A to B, and now the chair and all the things. So we'd love to
Sure.
hear that.
Look, I joined the Institute really when I had my first child. I'd moved back to Canberra, which is where I grew up, but not where I studied architecture. And I had set up the practice with my colleague, Sarah. And then I had a baby, and I really realized that I didn't have any architecture friends in Canberra, and I didn't have anybody who I could ask to look after a few projects so that I could have some time off. And I thought that, one way to build a network would be to join the Institute and to start going to some events and meet some people who worked in the same area and enjoyed some of the same interests that I could then lean on for help and who I could then support themselves. And so I joined the chapter here in Canberra. I joined the sustainability committee since that was my particular kind of experience set and where I felt really confident to contribute. And then I have great difficulty saying no to things. And so then I very quickly became the chair of the sustainability committee. And that gave me my first real experience in leadership within the Institute. That role put me into a position where I had to sit on our chapter council. And then I got asked to consider going for a role called chapter president, so the head of the organisation here in Canberra. And when I won that role, that put me up onto our national council. So that meant that I then had to represent Canberra and the work that we're doing at the Institute here in Canberra on the national stage. So sitting within a council where people come from Sydney and Melbourne and Perth and Brisbane and all over the country. And I really found that to be a really fascinating space to work in. Canberra is a really small city and we all know each other pretty well. And I found that actually I had a lot more confidence and a lot more drive to represent Canberra on a national stage than I had when I was working just within Canberra. Working within National Council is then how you get the opportunity to go for national president, the national president role. And when a few people approached me to consider doing it, and I laughed it off at first. I'm quite young to do the role, and I come from a smaller chapter, which it doesn't tend to. We don't have a lot of presidents from smaller chapters get up to the national president role. And then I guess the idea kind of stuck in my head, and I started thinking about why not give it a try? What's the worst that could happen? To put your hand up and enter the election. And so I did it, and I entered the election and I won the national president seat. So in Australia, the Institute has a 3-year term for national president. So we do a year as what we call president-elect, where you learn the role. And so you basically shadow the national president and learn what you're going to do. You start to build your network within that national leadership team. Then you do your year as national president where, you're in the chair and everything comes to you. And that's a really wonderful year, but very, very busy. And then you do a year as the immediate past president. So I'm currently in my past president year and I'm supporting the president who took over after me, Stuart Tanner. So that's, I guess, how I got up into the role. I'm one of the youngest. I'm the second youngest to ever have won the national president role. And I think it's a really wonderful thing that we are seeing. We're definitely here in Australia, but I know it from my experience of the American Institute as well. We're seeing a real change to the face of architecture, the face of our profession. And I think it's a wonderful thing to see more diverse, both culture and age and gender in our leadership. And I think that really encourages more people to actually think about both joining the profession and stepping up into leadership within the profession.
So congratulations, Shannon. Can you tell us your age? Is that allowed? We can talk
Of course,
about that in yeah.
I'm 42, so at
Oh,
41 I was
congratulations.
one of the youngest presidents ever.
So I think that what you said about like women in architecture. That is really amazing because I just came back from the Women's Leadership Summit in Boston. I don't know
Yes,
if
that
you've
looked
heard of
amazing.
that, the AIA Boston. I actually was a speaker. I gave a 3 hour workshop. So when I was there, I was really excited because the current CEO, Lakeisha Woods, is a woman. The current president is Emily Grandstaff Rice. Do you know her?
I do, yes.
And then Kimberly Dowdell is the
Yes.
100th president, and also Evelyn Lee. So they were all there on stage, and I had goosebumps. I actually took the photo of all three presidents and the CEO, or no, all three presidents, and I'm like, this is amazing because women have leadership positions, minority, Asian, and women in general in a man-dominated profession. So I'm really excited. It's the same thing that's happening in the institute, right? Is it Shirley is the president,
Shirley Chowdhury, yes, our board chair.
and then Jane Cassidy is the okay. I'm confused now. The current
So she's
president.
the incoming president.
Yeah,
So she will
yeah,
be she's in her first year in that 3-year term.
yeah. So isn't that amazing? Like, how do you feel about that women are leading in Australia, the institute?
I think it's wonderful. This year we actually even have Kirsten Thompson as our gold medalist. So it's the highest honour that the Institute bestows is the gold medal. And this year's gold medalist is an architect called Kirsten Thompson, who is just an incredible architect, an incredible advocate for the profession,
Yeah,
and such an inspiration for younger architects coming through. And so, I mean, it's a really wonderful thing to be in architecture at a time where we are really seeing the effects of some really hard work that people who've come before us have done. And I think that that's a wonderful thing to get to be a part of. It's not without its challenges. I mean, architecture is still quite heavily male dominated. I'm not sure what the statistics are in America, but in Australia, we have roughly 50-50 men and women in architecture school. So at studying, we have it actually leans slightly towards there's more female students than male at university. But when we hit registration, when we get our architectural license after a few years practicing, that number of women in the industry still drops off quite significantly. And I guess that's, a reflection on how long it takes to get through the study and the registration, and then at what age, I guess, we can have children. And so I think we still have some big challenges to face. I think diversity, one of the things I'm loving here in Australia is that our conversation about diversity is shifting, and we're moving away from diversity only ever being related to gender. And what we really need now is to see greater diversity in terms of all genders, in terms of culture and heritage, and in terms of actually embracing the land and the history of the land, the full history of the country that we're in, and bringing that into the way that we design. And I think that's a wonderful thing to see that shifting in architecture in Australia right now.
yeah. It's really fascinating to be a woman in architecture right now. Would you consider coming to the U.S. next year in the Women's Leadership Summit?
I would love to. That would be amazing. I've actually put in a couple of submissions to present at the American conference in Washington. So hopefully I'll be there for that. But no, I would absolutely love to be part of the Leadership Summit.
Okay. I also applied for the Washington, D.C. one. We'll find out shortly. But
Yes,
I think you absolutely have to come next year at the Women's Leadership Summit. I personally know Evelyn Lee and Kimberly. I'm sure you know them too because you're all in the same, level. But it was just, I mean, I've been to several conferences, like, almost like 50 conferences. This was special, the Women's
yeah,
Leadership Summit. I mean, I can also share with you when it's time, when they open up the event for speaking. I can share that link with you if you want to
absolutely.
speak.
Please do. It
Yeah,
was wonderful. I got to spend some time with Kimberly and Emily in Copenhagen this year.
yeah,
We were all attending the UIA World Congress on Architecture in Denmark. And so
yeah,
that's an incredible space to get to really connect with leadership across different areas of the world and in architecture. And that was an incredible opportunity and a fantastic space to hear what different areas and different countries are actually doing in terms of diversity and facing the climate crisis and affordability crisis. So yeah, it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah. So I will let you know when it's time because I get all the emails, right? When it's time to register, and I'll definitely send it to you. So before we dig into the this year's conference, could you give us a quick overview of the institute and the conference? Do you know, I mean, when it started and how it's changed over time?
Look, I'm actually quite new to conferences. It's funny. When my experience at university was probably not very traditional. I took a few years off after school and had a bit of a break. And then when I went into uni, I guess I was a little bit older. I'd been traveling, I'd been working, and then I started university and it was everything I think I wanted it to be. And then at the end of my first year of what was a 5-year degree, my dad was diagnosed with a terminal illness and I took on the role of nursing him. And so I balanced that with my study, but study understandably took a bit of a backseat because my priority was being with my father and making sure that he was cared for and had everything that he needed. And so I think as part of that, I really disconnected for a long time from organized kind of study and conferences and things like that. And so it wasn't until I started actually joining the institute after I'd had my children and starting to step up into leadership that I discovered conferences and this amazing kind of mixing pot of people and ideas and conversations. And so I've only been attending conferences for maybe the last probably 5 or 6 years. And I think one of the things that's really shifting for us at the Institute and our conferences is the impact that COVID had on how we gather. And so what we're finding is that our conferences used to be quite big affairs, not as big as the American Institute conferences. They're really something. I think I packed in with 10,000 other people to hear Barack Obama's, closing address in Chicago, which was phenomenal. Australian Institute Architect conferences aren't quite that big, but they used to be, very big events, and it was a really wonderful opportunity for people to come from all over the country and actually be in the room together. And obviously the pandemic really shifted that. It shifted how willing we are to be in a room with lots and lots of other people, and also how willing we are to travel. And Australia is a big country, so there's a lot of travel involved when you come to a conference. And from a climate perspective, are there other ways for us to gather? Are there other ways for us to meet, like we're meeting right now, which don't involve us expending fossil fuels flying around the country? And so I think that we went through a period of real reflection about what are the things that really have to be in person together and what are the things that we can do separately. So what we're realizing now is for us, the conference is a really wonderful opportunity to bring people actually together into the room. So we are doing our first properly kind of back to face-to-face conference this year. We will have between 700 and 1,000 people, so it's a much smaller event than the American conference. But one of the things that I think that the pandemic has taught us is how we can bring people in from all over the world without necessarily having to fly them. So our opening address is being given by the incredible Denise Scott Brown. And Denise obviously is just a pillar of the architectural profession. But when we approached her, she said, I would absolutely love to be a part of the conference, but I'm in my 90s and traveling around the world right now doesn't seem like a very sensible thing to do. So we've been able to arrange for her to dial in. And so we're able to use that technology that we really learnt to embrace during the pandemic to be able to bring people and voices to the Australian conference that we might not have been able to do previously. So the other part I think that is really shifting for us, Australia is going through a real period of self-reflection about who we are as a country. In the last couple of weeks, this has really come to a head where we held a referendum in an attempt to change our constitution to actually recognise the First Peoples of Australia in our constitution. We're one of the few developed countries that do not recognise our First People in our constitution. And sadly, that referendum failed and we weren't able to get that across the line. And so we're going through a period, I think, where we have to look really closely at who we are as a country and how we actually support one another and how we care for the country on which we actually live. And I think Australia's First Nations people have this incredible gift of history and knowledge and care for country that has continued for over 65,000 years. Australia's First Nations people are the oldest continuing civilization in the world. And so it's a really wonderful understanding of how to care for country that Australians and Australian architects are learning to embrace, and it's becoming intrinsically part of how we actually work in the built environment. So this conference gives us a really fantastic opportunity to hear from some of our First Nations architects and from some of our First Nations community in a way that help us navigate this moment of real change and reflection in our country. So that, I think, is going to be a really fantastic part of the conference. The conference theme is unprecedented. And of course, it takes a long time to plan a conference. I've never planned a conference before. I'm not quite sure how I got talked into planning this one, but I hope it all is a success. When we planned the conference, we were still in the pandemic, and we were just being bombarded with this message that these are unprecedented times and that everything is going to change. Life as we know it has, shifted irrevocably. And of course, now that we've come out the other side, we know that that's not necessarily true, that people are very quick to slip back into the habits that we had in a pre-pandemic world. But what we thought would be fun in that moment of kind of change between the pandemic and post-pandemic life is to play on this term unprecedented, which we are constantly being told and we're hearing everywhere, and the term precedent, which of course is in itself very, very common to the architectural profession, where we're constantly taught through university and then when we practice to look at precedents, to look at the projects and the work and the research and the thinking that has gone before us and layer our own thinking and experience onto it and see where we come out. So the conference theme of unprecedented is really playing on this moment of flux and change for us as a race, as well as that play on what can we learn from what's happened in the past to help kind of shape how we move forward.
So this is, when was the last time before this? Like 3 years ago, right?
For the conference?
Yeah, before like that.
We had a hybrid conference just as we were still in the final stages of the pandemic, and we had a hybrid conference, but we'd had a 2-year gap, I think, before then. And the hybrid conference it was postponed several times. We had to change the location. It was a very difficult time to plan something like that.
Kudos to you, Shannon. You're running your business. You're the chair. You're running the conference. I'm sure you have kids, right? Like, I don't know how old your kids are.
I do. They're little. My children like to come in. I'm not sure if you can see behind me. My children like to come in and build these towers so that no matter what, I remember that they're here. But the towers are becoming more and more precarious. And I live in fear that one day they're just going to topple over.
No wonder why you're the chair. You can do a lot of things. Is it time management, or you just know when to stop and compartmentalize?
Look, I don't think I compartmentalize very well. I probably need to. That's a skill I should work on. I think that I am somebody who has a lot of passion for architecture and a lot of passion for people. And I come from a family that are really strong activists and unionists. And so I was raised very much to fight for what you believe in and to always try and improve conditions for everybody. So to bring everybody with you. And I think for me, the Institute has almost become my union, for example. So this is how my work through the Institute and my work through, the conference and through the public speaking that I do is really about trying to help give back to my profession and to help improve the profession for everybody and help improve our built environment for everybody. So I think that gives me a lot of motivation and I get a lot of energy out of that.
And purpose as well, because you're really lifting everyone else, right?
That's the hope.
So Canberra, why in Canberra? It could have been in Sydney, Melbourne.
It could, but the thing is, they're always in Sydney and Melbourne. So obviously,
Oh,
Australia
okay.
has, we have on the east coast of Australia, we have three really big cities: Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane are our biggest cities. And what we wanted was to have a regional conference. So Canberra, for those of us who live in Canberra don't really think it's a regional place, but it is a much smaller city than Melbourne or Sydney. And
Yeah.
so this was a nice opportunity with support from the Institute to hold a regional conference to actually bring people to one of the smaller cities. We had originally thought when we proposed a regional conference that we might go to Cairns, which is right up in northern Queensland.
Yeah.
It's much harder to get to, and especially in this time in kind of post-pandemic, we're not back up to our flights. So there's not as many flights as there used to be before COVID, and so it's a bit harder to get to. And the decision was made that we might need to choose a region where people could drive to a bit more easily. And Canberra's a very easy car drive from Sydney. I do it all the time. It's about 2.5 hours, very easy, and an easy flight, an hour flight
It's
from
only two
Melbourne.
and a half hour drive.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm taking the plane. I would have, I'm landing in Sydney, and had I known, but I don't really, I'm afraid to drive in Australia.
Yeah, it's definitely different. But the flight from Sydney to Canberra is always funny. I think I did it yesterday, and you take off, they give you a drink, then they take it straight back, and you land. So it's a quick one, but it's a beautiful way to see. It's some
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful country between Sydney and Canberra, and so it's a nice way to arrive. You'll get a good view. Hopefully, the weather's lovely.
No, I'm looking forward to it. I registered for the one of the tours
Oh,
as
good. Which
well.
tour are you doing?
Oh, I forget which tour, but what was that? Let me look it up. But my question is like, who are the speakers for this conference? What are the topics around it? Is there a theme around the speakers? I know there's a diversity breakfast, which I registered for.
Oh,
So I'm
good.
going to attend that one. But yeah, can you talk a little bit about the different speakers and the keynotes?
Sure. So we tried to theme our keynotes around two themes, I guess. So with the idea of precedent, we looked at the precedents that have come before. And so what are the things we can learn that have happened in the past to help us face forward? But also, what is the work that's happening right now that will be the precedents that future generations look back on? And so within that, we've looked at really the two biggest issues for, I think, the world, but for Australia particularly at the moment, and that's culture and how we embrace the culture that actually makes up Australia, and the climate. So how we actually face the climate crisis, and really our position as thought leaders to help lead people out of the climate crisis. So we have some incredible speakers across that range. We have people like Kevin Carmody, who is actually a Canberra boy, but who lives, works, and has really made an incredible name for himself in the UK. Kevin's coming out. We have speakers like Stan Grant, a phenomenal writer and orator, really, an Australian First Nations journalist, and so he's coming to speak to us about culture and the importance of safety in the spaces that we make, and cultural safety, and in the businesses and organisations that we work within. We have Denise Scott Brown talking also about, I guess, the cultural shift that's happened in architecture in her lifetime. One of my favourite things that I actually heard Denise say in one of our conversations pre-conference was that her mother was an architect, and so she grew up in architecture, but it was really her reference point for architecture was her mother, and that when she started in architecture school on her first day and she realised she was really one of the only women in the room, she couldn't understand who all these men were and what they thought they were doing studying architecture, because architecture was women's work. And it really just, for me, it's a really powerful lesson that the things that we see around us really impact how we see and think about the world. And so that's both, out of our control and also within our control to make sure that we create spaces that everybody else can see themselves within, and that we create office environments that encourage much healthier work-life balances and enjoyment of the work that we do and lower stress levels and things like that. So Denise's talk is going to just be phenomenal. Canberra is our seat of government in Australia. It's where our Parliament House is and our federal politics. So we thought it could be interesting to have a little bit of politics in it. And we have Clover Moore, who's actually the Lord Mayor of Sydney, is going to come down and talk about some really transformational work that they did with the City of Sydney and changing how their city and the built environment within the city works. So that's going to be really interesting. And then we've got a whole range of smaller sessions that allow attendees to choose what their specific kind of interest set is. So we've got a panel conversation actually about communicating architecture. So we've got Kevin McLeod from Grand Designs in the UK, Darren Bradley, who's an incredible American architectural photographer, Tim Ross, who's an Australian comedian who is a self-confessed design nerd who loves all things architecture and has done incredible work communicating the value and the power of architecture to the public, and Linda Cheng, who is an editor with Architecture Media, one of our biggest architectural publishing organisations here in Australia. And we're going to have a conversation about how the kind of irony that actually often architects aren't very good at communicating to the public about what it is that we do. And interestingly, a lot of non-architects have a way of talking about architecture to the public that's actually really successful. So we're going to have an interesting conversation about, how they approach the work that they do in their careers that are all about promoting architecture and telling the story of architecture that architects might be able to learn something about in the work that we do. So yeah, it's a broad range, I think, of speakers, and hopefully something for everybody to find themselves in. I'll also be at the diversity breakfast. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Oh, great. I'll get to meet you.
And that one's going to be really personal. I think that's some really personal stories about different journeys through architecture.
So I'm really excited. I'm joining here. I'm in the Institute's portal. I'm joining the GML Heritage Tour.
Oh, fantastic.
Because I wanted the other tours, but I got closed out. But I think this is pretty good too.
It's amazing. So one of the things I think that Canberrans or Australians really forget is that Canberra has this incredible architectural legacy. So obviously it was designed by two Americans. It was designed by Marion Marnie Griffin and Walter Burley Griffin, who won a design competition. And whilst Walter gets most of the credit, Marion really probably deserves a lot more than she gets. Marion Marnie Griffin was one of Frank Lloyd Wright's first ever employees. She was the one, by all accounts, who convinced Frank Lloyd Wright to hire Walter Burley Griffin. And then she was the one who convinced Walter to enter the design competition for Canberra, this new capital city on the other side of the world. And it was, of course, famously her incredibly beautiful drawings and interpretation of the landscape, a landscape she'd never seen, that won the competition. And so Canberra has this incredible architectural story built in from before it was ever dreamed of being a city. And then we had the development of the city stalled during the war and the Great Depression. And when it picked back up again was in the midst of the mid-century. So we have the amazing wealth of modernist architecture, modernist buildings, especially in the city. And the Heritage Walk by GML will actually be an incredible story. I've done the walk with GML and a group called Canberra Modern, who do some amazing work celebrating our modernist architecture. And I've done the walk with them. I do it every chance I get, even if it's the exact same tour, because I always learn something new, and it's a really wonderful way to see the city.
I'm really excited. It's funny because my parents are in the Philippines, and I spend the summers there because I have an office there as well. And when I told them that I was coming to Australia, I really thought the conference was in Melbourne. For some reason, my dad was like, "Hey, can we come? Can my parents wanted to join me?" And my parents were like, "Well, you're in Melbourne. My mom and your mom and I will go to Canberra." I'm like, "What's that?" I didn't know the conference was in Canberra until I looked at it. But my parents said, we'll leave you in Melbourne. We'll go to Canberra because that's the capital. But
Yeah.
they ended up not coming because my mom had like a business meeting. But
Oh
I
no.
said, next time the next time I go to the Philippines, I can take them to Canberra. Now that I
Yes,
hope
that's
to meet a
right.
lot of people.
Well, it's a much easier trip for them from the Philippines here than it is for you coming from
Yeah.
America.
No, I really wanted them to come and like spend time with me, but maybe next time. So, any
Yeah.
other events around the conference? I know there are a lot of fringe events. Like I was looking, I got closed out of the design awards, but there are a lot of happy hours, right? What's going on outside of the conference?
So we've actually chosen to hold the conference not in a conference centre for lots of different reasons, but mostly because we have the Australian National University, which is right in the city, is an incredible modernist campus. So it's full of fantastic architecture, but it's also had a lot of development done recently. So we have both some beautiful old buildings and some amazing modern work. So it's a really fantastic melting pot of built environment, and they have some incredible spaces for us to kind of flow out into and mingle. And I think one of the most important parts about a conference, and the reason that a conference is so much more powerful when you go in person, are actually those fringe events and those opportunities to meet people and to build friendships with people around the world. I know that I get terrible social anxiety, and the first time I went to the American Institute conference, I was the national president and was representing the Australian Institute. And before I'd done anything at the conference, I had to go to this event one evening, and it was all the international heads, meeting, and it was, a social mixer. And I thought, oh gosh, this is like my worst nightmare. I have to walk into a room, I don't know anybody, and I just want to be in my hotel room eating takeout and watching TV, and anyway, I talked myself into it and I went, and it's wonderful. And now I run into those people around the world at different events. Recently, we were in Venice for the Architecture Biennale, which is an
Oh,
absolute
yes.
treat to get to attend. And I was walking, and there's people everywhere. There's thousands of people, and I ran into Ruth, a colleague who is in Germany, who I met at that night at that mixer, and who has become an incredible colleague and somebody to talk to and things. And so I think those fringe events are actually one of the biggest benefits of actually going to a conference. So we have lots of social gatherings around, and that we've tried to break the gatherings up a little bit so that people can choose ones that are of particular interest to them. So we have a fellows cocktail party. We have an Imagine event. So Imagine is our group that we call, so they're our emerging architect network. So they're not
Okay.
students anymore, but they're still in those first kind of 10 years of practice, and they're really
Yeah.
finding their feet and who they are. So the Imagine event will be fantastic. On the Saturday before the conference, we're doing an incredible event. We've just actually been given a go ahead to do it this morning, so there's no details yet because I have to do that after this.
Oh, okay.
But my mentor was an architect called Laurie Verne. He was a fabulous, fabulous human and an incredible architect. He's actually really the closest thing to Frank Lloyd Wright that Australia had. He taught at Taliesin. He
Oh,
studied
wow.
architecture in America, and he was a designer in the American organic style of architecture. And there's a house of his just outside of Canberra, about 10 minutes outside of Canberra, where the owners have very graciously allowed us to put on a small talk, a little gathering for some people who are in Canberra for the conference to come and see the house and to hear about Laurie's work and the legacy that he's left in Canberra. His own house that he designed and built
Wow.
actually a lot himself is in one of the tours, the Architect's Own Houses tour.
Yeah,
But
I
it was
got
very
closed
quick
out
to
of
sell
that
it.
one. That
Yeah,
was my
that one.
original. But
My own house is in that one. So I'm busy trying to both
oh,
write my speeches
really?
for everything and weed the garden and get the kids to clean their rooms because there's a busload of people coming to see the
Oh,
house.
wow, that's great. So
So
I'm
yeah,
attending, well, I have my whole conference here, but I just have a question about the gala dinner. Do I have to dress up? Is it like
Australian architects don't. We're very laid back, so we
yeah,
don't
cuz
do.
when I saw that I'm like, I need to buy a
Do
dress
I
or a
need a
gown,
ball
black
gown?
and white. What is that? No?
No. So it's funny. it's interesting actually that when I went to my first American conference and I got an invitation to a gala dinner, and I sent to one of my best friends is an American, and I sent him a message and I said, in Australia when we say gala we mean this. What do you mean in American? He said, oh no, it's it's a
Okay,
big
so
deal.
can
You
you
need to
please
get
tell
dressed
me
up.
what that is? Because my friends and I are like helping me find a dress and like fancy earrings and like golden shoes. I just need to know
I say go
what are
whatever
you
you're
wearing?
comfortable in. I tend to wear a fun skirt, a nice shirt, and some really cool earrings. That's my
Okay.
go-to. As I said,
Okay.
I get massive social anxiety, and so I've kind of worked out what my outfit is that I feel confident in, and I'm comfortable to be myself, and go with that. One of the things I think I love most about Australian architects is that we wear sneakers everywhere.
Oh,
Everybody wears, comfortable shoes, which I
yeah.
love because I just have terrible trouble with my feet and my back. And so stilettos are just not for me. And so I think you'll find that Australian architects, even to the gala event, will wear things that make them feel comfortable and make them feel, fun and
Good,
fancy.
good.
But it's not necessarily a cocktail dress at all.
Good to know because I when I reread it, I just registered and then now that I'm packing this weekend, I freaked out when I
You're not
saw
alone in
gala dinner. Like
packing.
that sounds so Hollywood. And I'm like you. I go to a lot of events because I'm also a speaker. I'm in the speaker circuit. I still get really nervous, and I when I'm alone, I also get butterflies and like I get nervous. But then you meet all the people, and then my my anxiety will last like 2 minutes, and then it's gone.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's impressive. I really love Brene Brown's work. I don't know if you read much of
Yes, I
Brene
know
Brown's
Brene
work,
Brown. Yeah.
but I love that she says, she gets nervous. She can't go out on stage with the stage lights down. She needs to be able to see the audience so that that's part of her thing for feeling less nervous. And I think, well, somebody who's as experienced at public speaking and as engaging and successful as she is at communicating, if she still gets nervous, it's okay that I get nervous.
Yeah, you'll do fine. I saw your video. I'm like, did she memorize that script or was there a teleprompter? You look so good on that
There,
video.
there was a cameraman who was flicking pieces of paper so that I remembered what I had to say, but we made it
That's
look
why
harmless.
I was talking to Mary. I'm like, Mary, Shannon's so good on camera. Like you were so, like as if you were doing it for years, like just talking to the
Well,
camera.
we did
But
take
it's
about 100 takes for each of those things, so it's okay. They've just edited out the ones where I didn't stumble.
so before we wrap up, is there anything you would like to mention or share about the conference, like anything special, anything you want to plug? I mean, this is a preview to, is there anything else you want to share or invite other people?
Look, I think that the really important thing for me is that people come to the conference, they make some connections with people that they might not have met before, they get to see people who, they have been missing during the last few years of not getting to see each other, and they see a really beautiful city. I think, Canberra is a really unique space and it's an incredible city to live in. We don't want too many people to come and live here because we like how little it is, but I want people to enjoy it. And so I think that's my biggest take home, I think, is for people who are coming to the conference to really get to relax and enjoy the city. It's a wonderful city to wander around.
Really, I'm really looking forward to it. Like I said earlier, Canberra people are so extremely kind and warm, and I'm really excited to visit. Also, I do a lot of I have a mini microphone and I always do a post summit interview. So if you see me, I normally ask two questions and I roll out like I have mini podcast series for like maybe 5 minutes on what's your biggest takeaway from the summit or from the event and how does this affect you as an architect or so if you see me, just grab me. I'll probably have my phone and my little mini mic. So I like to do that. I mean, for the Women's Leadership Summit, I interviewed 7 people and I create like mini video podcasts. So,
That sounds awesome.
please introduce me to people who want to just, share their experience after the summit.
Absolutely, will do.
And Shannon, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to meeting you in in next week, I think, right?
Next week, that's right. Well, travel safe, and I look forward to seeing you on this side.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Architect My Life, a podcast brought to you by MGS Global Group. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to add to the conversation through your own experiences, I encourage you to be a guest in one of our upcoming episodes. Visit architectmylife.com to apply and learn how.